Okay, first off, I want to remind you that this video is being recorded. And I'll start again. So good day and welcome to our recruiting and hiring in a post-COVID environment. My name is Jeannie Best and I'm with the Clarion University Small Business Development Center. I'm excited to have you join us today. We are presenting recruiting and hiring in a post-COVID environment today. And a few things before we begin, just to take note. If you're experiencing audio problems, please click the arrow next to the microphone icon to make sure that you have chosen the correct speaker option, or you may consider dialing in. I have added some of those instructions to the chat, but our Zoom has changed. So if you need those instructions, please just say so in the chat and I will dig those up as soon as Pam has started. As a reminder, all participants have been muted and your video is disabled. If it is not, I will check on that and make sure that it is. If you have any questions, please enter your question in the Q&A by simply clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get your questions answered quickly. I will be monitoring those and I'll interrupt Pam when needed so that she doesn't have to monitor that as well as do her presentation. Like I said before, please note that this webinar is being recorded. And now I will introduce the SBDC. Welcome to recruiting and hiring in a post-COVID environment. We hope that you find our presentation useful in building your knowledge about recruiting and hiring during these trying times. The Clarion University Small Business Development Center prides itself in providing education plus information plus tools that will help you have better business decisions. We are one-on-one business consulting at no charge and confidentially. We work with prospective and existing for-profit businesses. And a small business is considered to be any business that is 500 employees or less, which is just about every business in our region. If you would like to see our training events across the state, please go to www.pasbdc.org. For training events just from Clarion University SBDC, go to www.clarion.edu/SBDC/training. We also provide you with information, resources, and referrals, along with a lot of other things that we provide for our clients. The Clarion University is one of 16 centers in the state of Pennsylvania. We are right here. We have 10 counties. If you are viewing this webinar and are not within our region, just contact the PASBDC at pasbdc.org/centers to find the center that can help you. The Clarion University SBDC is also funded through PA Prep, through America's SBDC, through the SBA, and locally through Clarion University as a match. If you need assistance from our SBDC, we ask that you set up a virtual or in-person meeting with an experienced business consulting for personalized, free, and confidential recommendations. You can sign up at www.pasbdc.ecenterdirect. That's ECENTERDIRECT.com /sign up. Visit our websites for additional information. I've already told you both of those websites, so I won't repeat it. And you will receive that with information throughout our transactions here. You can contact us at any time via email at sbdc@clarion.edu or calling us at 814-393-2060. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Today's speaker is Pam Watkins of Watkins HR Strategy. Pam is an accomplished HR professional with over 30 years of experience in public and private sectors. Pam has in-depth knowledge in implementing human resource management strategies to recruit, train, and retain a high-performing and motivated workforce. Pam has been a change agent specializing in organizational development, talent management, organizational restructuring, employee relations, and health and safety. Recently, she has been certified in managing employee health and safety programs in Canada. Also recognized for HR consulting, Pam has completed project work for performance management, job descriptions, recruiting, succession planning, employee health and safety, employee management training, and employee relations. Welcome, Pam. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So you guys can just call me the HR geek. That'll serve you better. I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
I see your screen.
Okay, good. Okay. So thank you for inviting me to be with you this morning. The topic we're going to talk about is interviewing, hiring, and onboarding in a post-COVID world. And we all know that there have been a lot of changes in the past couple of years. And in large part, it's changed the way we do things. When people were working remotely, when we had to scramble to find out how to write a pandemic plan and how are you going to still maintain your workforce needs, but making sure everybody is safe and healthy. So a lot of changes. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit. Did that flip? Oh, there we go. We're going to talk a little bit about your hiring, now what, how COVID has impacted your recruiting, some recruiting basics and tools. I'm going to give you a little interviewing 101. We're going to talk a little bit about employment laws related to recruiting and hiring and some changes that are coming very fast. We're going to talk about how to do a good onboarding, making new hires feel welcome and part of your culture and sense of importance in your organization. So when people say to me, how do you recruit? How do you start? We're a small business. We're having trouble finding people. You're always recruiting. I tell people, if you're looking for someone to come and join your organization, you are recruiting 24/7. That means when you're at a kid's sporting event, that means when you're shopping, anywhere you are, because you don't know who is connected to who. I made one of my best hires in my entire career at one of my son's wrestling matches. I was talking with a parent from that was actually wrestling my son from another team, a visiting school. And during the course of the conversation, I found out he had local ties and actually had property in Venango County. And I had a need for someone with his skills in Venango County. And next thing you know, we were connecting the dots and he came on board. And again, that was just happenstance. I had posted the job. I did all the normal things that I was supposed to do as a recruiter or HR director, but you never know where you're going to meet people. So a lot of things right now with recruiting, I see a lot of jobs being posted, or when someone reaches out to me and says, can you help me recruit for this position? and they give me a very poorly written job description. And if you look on job sites, you're going to see where people just cut and paste a job description. And sometimes it's pages long. And that's the way they're trying to recruit. So when you're recruiting, you've got to include an element of networking and marketing. And what I mean by that, we're going to get into a little bit. So a job description, I'm an HR geek, so I love to write job descriptions. However, job descriptions are not actually required by any federal or state law at this time. They're just a good thing to have. It's a good practice to have them. They help legitimize what your minimum hiring criteria is. They help identify your performance standards and help you be able to measure an employee's performance. And most importantly, they identify essential job functions. Those are things like attendance, physical requirements to do the job, educational requirements, certifications, and so forth. I'm going to take one step back and say anything that I'm telling you today is my personal opinion and is not to be construed as any type of legal advice. If you need legal advice, I'm going to be the first person to tell you there are tons of great attorneys out there that do labor law, and they are great resources for you as well. But when you're looking to do a job posting, you need to make it appealing. It has to speak to who you are as an employer and what you're offering. Obviously, you need to list why the job exists. So when I tell people, when you're looking to post a advertisement for a job, think about the simple question, this job exists to do what? That is what you want to put in. You don't need a complete task list like makes the coffee in the morning, gets the mail, sorts the mail. You need this job exists to do what? And if you can answer that and add your ADA statement, you're on your way to a good job posting. And an ADA statement is simply that statement that says, reasonable accommodations can be made, to perform the essential job functions of this role. Okay. So let's talk next about what's happening. And this is an old slide. It actually was the projection through 2020. But one of the things that's impacting us now is not just post-COVID. We were seeing all of the stuff line up for what they're calling the Great Resignation or the resignation tsunami 5 years ago. Baby boomers, as you can see on this chart, are starting to retire. And in one survey, they predict that an average of 10,000 baby boomers are going to be retiring every day between now and 2025. So think about that. What I tell people is kind of look at your own workforce and find out what is your demographic telling you. If you have a bunch of people, like 50% of your workforce that's over 50, you should be starting to think about what knowledge do they have? What tribal knowledge do these people have that when they retire, they're going to take with them? I'm kind of a perfect example. I didn't work until normal retirement age. I decided that I wanted to do consulting and I retired early. And more and more people are doing that in professional capacities as well as other capacities, because what they're figuring out is that whole work-life balance. Things are shifting, things are changing. And the pandemic taught us a lot about, I think, you don't have to physically be on site at an office to be effective as a worker. Now, obviously, in manufacturing and production type roles, certainly you need people physically there, but some of your support roles can be done off-site, and it's doing a couple things. One, it's opening up the borders, so to speak. So, for example, some work that I've recently done, even though I'm a practitioner in PA, I've got some knowledge across states. So I was asked by an international company to do a payroll conversion for them. And that meant other states, other countries, because I can work from my my office and not have to physically be on site to do some of that type of work. So think about how many people in your organization are going to be leaving. And it's not just, when I say succession planning, I don't want you to think just of your CEO or your vice president level. It's everybody that's in a critical position to make your organization successful. And if you have people that are getting close to retirement age, or you think might want to take an early retirement, you should be planning for how are you going to backfill that role. So COVID and beyond. So there's some new interview questions that people are asking now. And if the position is remote or hybrid, a lot of questions that I get from employers are, I want to let my non-exempt hourly employees work remote, but how do I know that they're really doing their work? Like, how do I know how they're spending their day? Are they out sunning themselves, or are they actually in at their computer working? So some questions that we're now seeing being brought up are, how do you organize your day? How do you stay on task? Have you ever worked remotely, and what was that like? Did you enjoy working remotely? What were the challenges you had? How did the pandemic affect your career goals? I'm seeing a lot of young folks coming out of post-university courses now, and they feel a little bit off guard because they didn't get their full internship. I spoke with a young lady last week, and she was applying to a position that she's well suited for, but she felt very ill prepared because her internship got canceled and she doesn't have any actual hands-on idea of what would happen in that role. Communication is big when you're hiring somebody remotely. How are you going to collaborate with them? How are you going to make them feel part of the team? I like to ask candidates, what lessons, if any, have you learned during the pandemic? A lot of people have done a little bit of self-exploration. They might have taken some classes online, might be considering a career change. You can ask about travel. If it's a hybrid position, you can say, would you be willing to travel 1 day a month or 5 days a month or whatever, or come into the office a couple days a week? And where appropriate, you can ask about vaccine requirements. If you're in healthcare and that is a standard that you've set for all of your other employees, there is no problem in explaining the expectations to prospective candidates. Some things, though, that you should not ask people, where is your home office located? So not everybody that works at home has the luxury of a room dedicated as their office. So long as they can get the work done, it's not, you can't tell somebody, well, if you're working out of your kitchen, or if you're working out of your living room, we have a problem with that. Okay. Do you have children at home, or do you have health, or do you have childcare provided? We don't want to hear kids crying in the background. Are you overly concerned about your health if we have to have you come in? Again, you don't want to probe any deeper than you have to around health issues. Something that I am finding very interesting is that the interview is changing. I think a lot of candidates know that they are in the driver's seat, particularly those with special skill sets. So the interview, well, we've always said for 35 years, I've told people the interview is meant to be an exchange of information. I want you to ask me questions. 10 years ago, nobody asked me any questions. Like I would say, do you have any questions? And they might say, well, what are the potential, what's the potential for promotion or whatever. But now these candidates are very savvy, and they're asking employers questions. What's your policy from working at home? You've listed this job as in office, but could it be hybrid? Could I work from home 2 days a week? What were the biggest challenges to your company during COVID? Has your organization laid off employees since COVID started? What safety measures are you taking to make sure that everybody's safe if we would have another resurgence? And then they're asking, what tools would you provide me that I could work remotely? Are you going to give me a stipend for my internet? Are you going to provide me my own laptop and access to your network? And so the questions that are now being raised by candidates are very different than what have been raised in the past. So the Great Resignation, or the resignation tsunami, as it's been called, I think is a combination of things. Notwithstanding the baby boomers are retiring, people do want better work-life quality, and people are being more selective about where they work and the type of job that they do. I've talked to a lot of organizations who say to me, well, we think we have some disgruntled employees because we're working them so much overtime, but we can't find people. And so and I say, well, what problem are we trying to solve? Are we trying to solve your recruiting issues? Or are we trying to solve a culture issue that people are disgruntled? And what are you doing about those things? Getting people to think outside the box and do recruiting via social media. I talked to somebody last week, and they said to me, we don't understand. We placed an ad in the local paper and we didn't get any applicants. Well, think about the demographics of your local newspaper distribution. For example, I get the local newspaper, but only because my mom lived with us prior to her passing. People of my mom's generation read the local newspaper every day. Many people now choose to get their news online. They get it on television. They get it a number of different ways. But if you're connected to Facebook, if you're connected to some of these news reports that come in online, most of what you need might be there. So posting only in a local newspaper is not going to give you the leverage that you want. Employment applications. Some companies are saying, I'm not going to do employment applications anymore. But the employment application, the reason that I still believe that there's a real need for it, one is because it allows you to get consistent information in the same format from every candidate. It's a way that you can compare credentials, because when you get resumes in, resumes are going to be written in all different kinds of formats. And if you've done any recruiting, I know that you understand me when I say not all resumes are created equal, and some of them are impossible to weed through. This also allows you to look at the essential job functions. If you have an application that you're giving somebody along with the job description, and you've clearly listed your essential job functions, you can ask, are they able to perform them with or without accommodation? Now, some things we're going to talk about later in the presentation relate back to this employment application. But the employment application also usually has two things that protect the employer. One is it gives you permission to check references, okay? And two, it has normally a statement on there that says, if you falsify this document, it can be grounds for termination. So if somebody falsifies their education or their experience and it comes out later, it's legal grounds for termination. Okay, whoops. Let's talk about the actual interview itself. So a lot of things have changed with interviewing candidates, not just the questions, but how you interview. It used to be people always came in for face-to-face interviews. We're seeing more now. Zoom interviews, virtual interviews are becoming the norm, and they're not bringing people in until they're pretty sure that they have their candidate. I used to do a lot of phone interviews, but now it's much easier just to jump on and do a Zoom interview or a Teams interview. Types of interviews, there's basically three types of interviews: structured, behavioral, and problem solving. The one that I recommend is structured, but I also recommend that you add in some behavioral and problem solving type questions into that structure. So what do I mean by a structured interview? What I mean is take a look at your job description and determine what skills are actually needed to perform this job successfully. What information do you actually need from them? So if I'm hiring for a general manager in manufacturing, it's not the same as a store manager in retail, right? A lot of differences there. Some of the skill set may be the same. You want to see some leadership, you want to see some dedication, you want to see some continuous improvement, but the hours, the scope, everything is different. So really, if you don't have a job description, you should create them. And there's tools to help you do that if you've never done that before. But you need to plan what that interview is going to look like. And I do recommend asking the same questions in the same order of each candidate. The reason for that is, as you're making notes, you know what's been asked and answered and how they've answered each question. So interview questions that are general but broad enough to give you some real meat. I start every interview with, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I don't lead them. So some people start off and they say, well, I'm married and I have 2 kids, right? We don't care about that, but that's what they want to tell you. Then they'll get into their work experience and history. I always ask, when you saw this job posted, what about it interested you enough to apply? Because what are we looking at? Are we looking at the geographic location that was important? They know the pay might be better. Do they really want to do that kind of work? I like to ask people about challenges that they've overcome. It gives you kind of the scope and depth of what somebody has actually had to deal with in their work environment. I talk to them about work environment. What kind of work environment would make you feel most comfortable? And if somebody says, oh, I need a quiet office, I can't have any interruptions, and you know that the work environment is going to put them in a cubicle with lots of interruptions and multitasking, probably they might not be the best fit. I like to ask about what kind of interaction they expect to have from their ideal supervisor. Some people are very firm and they'll say, I don't want anybody that is a micromanager. And if you know you're hiring for yourself or someone else that kind of likes to have their thumb on everything, might not be a good fit. I talk to them about what words or phrases would people use to describe their personality. You would be amazed what that question will bring you. And it's not always what you're hoping for. I asked a candidate one time if they could create their ideal job, what would they be doing? And the young man paused for a minute and he said, I would design video games. Now, I was looking for a welder. Okay. So while he had some welding training and a little bit of welding experience, he had no interest in welding. His interest was in computers and media. And so the more we talked through the interview, I found out that he was interviewing kind of out of obligation because mom and dad thought he should have a job rather than go back to school and pursue what he really wanted to do. Could he have welded? Yeah, probably. Would he have liked it? No. Would he have stayed? No. So it's, let people, the 80-20 rule is where they are talking 80% of the time and you are listening. You're listening during that. So I tell interviewers, get comfortable with silence. So we're going to do what I'm going to call the pause right now. I'm going to ask you a question and I'm going to pause. And I'm going to give you the length of time that you should be pausing to give them time to respond. So tell me a little bit about the most frustrating thing you've ever encountered at work. All right, that was the pause. That was a slow count of 10. And I bet to all of you, it seemed longer. Okay. We're used to having very quick communications. You think about how fast we respond on a cell phone, texting, emailing. We're used to the whole quick, quick, quick. But when you're interviewing, you need to get comfortable with the pause. Don't jump on to the next question until you've given them time to answer. Obviously, the right environment when you're interviewing is important. I talked a little bit about using a template to ask everybody the same questions, kind of in the same order, so it's easier for you when you're done to kind of assess. Start with some questions that give you a base of knowledge. So, how did you hear about us? Do you know anybody that works for us? Ask the right questions. The questions need to be relevant to the job you're trying to fill. I was interviewed once by somebody, and they asked me, if you could be a tree, what kind of tree would you be? And I'm sitting there thinking, is this for real? Okay, so while some people like to throw in those zing questions, it's best that we don't start asking people about the kind of tree they want to be unless it really relates to the job they're trying to do. It's better to ask those behavioral questions, or a question if it's a position that they might be working under a great deal of stress. Ask them, what causes you stress? A good question to get an idea of what they actually do in their current job is, I say, you go in, you get your choice of caffeine, and you do what all day? Okay. And that's when you'll start getting into the meat of what they're actually doing. So background checks and pre-employment physicals could be a whole workshop on their own. But I'm going to cover this just at a high level so you have an understanding of what your obligations are if you're going to do background checks. So there is a way to do background and reference checks on your own. But we're going to talk about some reasons why that might not be the best course of action. If you're doing reference checks and you're calling an employer where somebody has worked before, you're likely to not get a lot of information. And because we're in a litigious society, people are afraid to release information. Unless it's for a DOT position and you have somebody sign off. Now, if you have a form that is a release of information that you can send to their previous employer, that's fine. But most of us, what I've found in this local area, we pick up the phone and we call and we say, hey, can you verify that Joe Smith worked for you as a laborer from this date to this date? And would you rehire him? Yes or no? Okay. And that's fine. You can do that. But if you use an accredited background screening company, they are governed by a strict set of standards. And that's kind of what I'm going to call the gold seal of approval. There's lots of moving parts with that. Typically, in order for a background check to be done, you have to have a release signed by the prospective employee. And then the background check is done. And they can do, based on what your needs are, they can do employment verification, they can do education verification, and they can do criminal history. Put a pin on the criminal history for just a minute. We're going to come back to that. They can also do credit reporting. Now, there have been lawsuits filed over the credit reporting backgrounds being done because a credit check has to be job related. Like, why would you do a credit check on somebody that's going to be in a labor position? Credit check may be important if you're hiring somebody in banking that's working with a lot of money, or maybe you're controller of your company that's balancing and taking care of all of your accounts. But other than that, credit checks are typically not done unless there's a real compelling reason to do them. So understand the limits on that. Salary history. If you have an employment application, or you're interviewing somebody and you say, well, tell me your salary history. And you've all seen the applications that ask that. You were at this job from this date to this date. What was your title? What were your earnings? So right now, what's starting to happen is there's a big move that employers must post wages on their job postings. It's already law in New York City. So in New York City, if you're an employer and you're posting a position, you must list the wage range. Okay. Must, it's a requirement. State of Washington has adopted that. That goes into effect in Washington State on 1/1 of 2023. Now, we all know these things start in big cities and on the West, and then they come. Okay, so get ready. That is something that in the future you need to be aware of. Right now, you can post it as negotiable or based on experience or whatever. But if you look and you're posting on some of the, what I'm going to call the mainstream websites, like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, they're going to throw in, whether you put it on or not. If you leave it blank, they're going to throw in a market rate. So be aware of that. Go back out and look at what your posting looks like, because sometimes you're going to have applicants apply and they'll say, well, wait a minute. You're telling me this starts at 45,000. Last week when I applied on Indeed, it said 51,000. So be aware that that's happening. So we're making some pretty interesting changes in terms of what your employment applications are going to need to look like in the future. So let's talk about questions related to criminal history. There are changes that are in place right now in some cities in Pennsylvania. Philadelphia is very strong with these changes. This is called Ban the Box. If you've not heard of this, it's an international campaign. It was started by civil rights activists, and it's advocating for ex-offenders. So basically what it's saying is, it used to have on your, and you may still have on your employment application, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And then typically the next question is, if yes, please explain. So basically this group is saying, and the law actually says, hiring decisions need to be based on merit of qualifications, not solely based on criminal record. So what is happening is, as this catches on, Philadelphia and New York, I know Pittsburgh was looking at it. I don't know that I haven't checked recently to see if it got adopted there, but your bigger cities have already adopted this. Some states have already adopted this. So that question, if you're updating your employment application, you may want to look at that and just take it off, because it's very soon you're not going to be able to ask that. If right now, if you're interviewing somebody and they check that on your box, if it's more than 7 years old, you're not supposed to consider it. Okay. Now let's talk about what that means. So if I am, there are exceptions. And so we're going to talk about the exceptions. If I'm hiring somebody for a reading aid in an elementary school, and somebody that is a registered sex offender applies, and that comes back on the background, no, I'm not going to hire them. And I'm okay to not hire them. But if it's a DUI, or even say a break-in that happened when somebody was 21 and now they're 35 and they've never had any more criminal difficulties or been in any kind of trouble, you have to look at the job and say, would that have offense happening that long ago disqualify them today? Because when I first started in HR 35 years ago, that did happen. I worked in banking. And if anybody checked the box for a misdemeanor or felony, we deep filed them. We did not move them forward in the process. But that is all changed. So you have to look. What I tell people that I've trained is how long, look at some factors. How long ago did it happen? what was the offense, the seriousness of the offense, what has happened since then. And, sometimes people will disclose more than they actually have to. And you, as an interviewer or business owner, have to kind of say, how is that relevant to what I'm looking to do now? So please be aware that there are lots of changes coming in the future as recruiting continues. We all know about equal opportunity employment. Most of you probably have this posting or one very similar to it posted in your workplace. If not, you should have. We talk about, yes.
Jacqueline has a question. How do we use the federal bonding program?
That I'm not sure. I haven't done that for quite a while, but I will look into that and let you know. I can get back to you, Jeannie, and you can let everybody know.
Okay, that sounds good.
How to use federal bonding program. Okay. I haven't used that since my banking days when I was recruiting. Okay, but I'll find out. I'm sure there's been changes.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Sure. So we talk about equal opportunity, but what does it really mean in terms of hiring? So here's just some general reminders. The Age Discrimination in Employment Act is out there. It's protecting people aged 40 and older. Obviously, you can't make any discrimination based on age, disability, genetic information, national origin, and there's a big long list. I'm not going to read these to you. Pregnancy Discrimination Act. I have seen this a lot recently. A woman will come into an interview. She is visibly pregnant, and she says, and she'll say, I know you're not going to hire me because I'm pregnant. Okay. Doesn't matter. You cannot not hire somebody that is qualified just because they're pregnant and you know they're going to need some time off work. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities. And let's talk about what a disability means for just a minute. We're talking about physical disabilities, but we're also talking about mental disabilities. And under the ADA, alcoholism is also covered as a disability. Illegal drug use is not covered under the ADA. So when people think of the ADA, it used to be back in 1990 when this came out. I remember when it came out, and my biggest concern at that point was making sure that the restrooms and things in the office I was running were handicap accessible. It's way beyond that now. You could have an employee working for you, and they come in with a request for an accommodation. If you don't know anything about ADA, please educate yourself. There are so many legal pitfalls when it comes to ADA because people don't understand it. There's a great resource called JAN, Job Accommodation Network, that's out there, and you can go online and you can ask them questions. And they will help you. It's free to contact them and they will help you. But if somebody comes and says, okay, I can no longer work overtime. You've been working me 12 hours a day. My doctor says I can only work 8 hours. The burden is on the employer to engage in what is known as the interactive process to find out how we can accommodate that individual. So again, that could be a whole nother session on itself. Those questions are best given to a labor attorney. Please, if you're not aware of this and you have employees that have requested accommodations and you're not sure what to do, don't just say, well, everybody works overtime. You either work it or you're out of here. That would be a very bad thing. So lots of resources out there online. The EEOC.gov is a great resource. And if you are an HR practitioner and you're not a member of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Managers, it's a great investment as well. So I'll put in a plug for them as well. Let's talk real quickly. before we have some questions and answers, about what happens on the first day, because I've seen this done so very wrong so many times. This week, yesterday, Monday, I went to a customer site and I did some onboarding for them. Well, I did my part, but they didn't have their part done. What do I mean by that? The individual that they hired, his computer's not there yet. Therefore, he has no email. Therefore, he can't what? He can't work. He's not, so they've got him and he's excited to get started, but it's going to be a couple days of him watching training videos before his equipment comes. So when you're hiring somebody, make sure that that first day is a really good first impression. Cost of losing an employee in the first year is estimated to be at least 3 times their salary. So if you've never looked into the cost of turnover in one of your positions, it's a great exercise to do. Google how to calculate the cost of turnover. It'll blow your mind because you're going to add in there your recruiting expenses, all the people that interviewed that person, the new hire paperwork. You're adding them into your payroll system. You're adding them into your benefit system. You're adding them into your 401k system. Then you're training them, hands-on training. That's the trainer's time plus what you're paying them. It's expensive to spend a year training someone to have them leave. It's expensive to even train them for 90 days and have them leave. So advantages to good onboarding. What I love to see, first day of work, wherever they're at, even if they're on a production floor, if they're in a kitchen, I don't care where they are, a little welcome note. Takes 2 minutes to print one up. Welcome, we're looking forward to having you. Or have a little refreshment there and take a 10-minute break with your team and let them get to know each other a little bit on a personal level. It'll do 2 things. 1, it solidifies the relationship. 2, it lets that brand new employee know that there's other people around that they can go to when they have questions. Makes them feel valued and important, that you're really glad that you have them. And it relieves some of that, what I'm going to call new hire anxiety. So that first day is really important, that the employer be really on top of their game and not like, oh, you're here. Gosh, where are we going to sit you? I've seen that happen. A little bit of swag, like if you have like a keychain or a coffee mug or whatever, just make them feel integrated from the very first day. So the first 90 days is always called the introductory period or probationary period. And it's usually the time where you're evaluating the employee to see if they're going to be successful, if you feel that they have the right skills, education, and knowledge to do the job that you hired them for. But it's also their 90 days to evaluate you. Again, we're talking about the two-way street. So again, it's important that there's frequent touch base points and make a plan. Have a supervisor check in. How's it going? What do you need from us? Have those. There's a popular term right now called a stay interview. And it's where the employer, a supervisor or a leader, goes and talks to the employees and says, what are we doing well? What could we improve upon? Take that feedback and do something with it. To ask for feedback and then not do anything is worse than not asking. So if you're going to do a stay interview and you're going to touch base, say 30, 60, and then do a 90-day formal evaluation, make sure you're asking them, what can we do to help you? What do you need from me as your supervisor? They'll tell you if they're a dedicated employee and they're struggling with something. So often what I've seen happen, and again, I've worked for a long time in this field, is the 90 days goes by and the employer's busy and it's like, oh yeah, they're not making any trouble. So we're just going to leave them there and they're going to be fine. And then a year later, the supervisor comes to human resources and says, this person's terrible. They're not doing the job. We need you to terminate them. And I would look back and I'd say, really? Well, what have we done so far? Where have you documented it? Have you coached them? Have you counseled them? Have you put them on a performance improvement plan? Have you retrained them? Have you given them a last chance agreement? And the answer is always no. And so I say, well, now you need to begin to do your job. It's coaching them. Hey, here's something that we're seeing that you're not, doing correctly. Do you need some retraining, or how can we help you get this down? Then you counsel. I mean, there are so many steps before you just resort to termination. So again, that first 90 days is really important. The first 90 days isn't meant to, I mean, I know it's considered, and people think, oh, 90 days, we can just get rid of them if we don't like them. Well, you can, but it's not always the smart decision to make for a number of reasons. So I take that 90-day period and get to know them and try to be part of their success. All right. So any questions at this point for me?
There was a little bit of clarification that Jacqueline had wanted to say
Okay.
about that question she had. Her exact question was, how do we use the federal bonding program if we can't ask this question? I mean, how do we use the federal bonding program if we can't ask candidates if they are ex-felons?
So if you have certain job requirements that say they can't have a felony record, as long as it's a bona fide job qualification, you can ask the question. But if it's got to be, there's got to be a reason. So for example, if you're hiring, again, it's got to relate to the job. If your job requirement says they must be bonded federally and they won't take an ex-felon, as long as that's a bona fide job requirement. The federal bonding program, like I said, it's been years since I have done any work with it. But there are incentives also out there if you're hiring ex-felons. And I don't know a lot about those, but I can find some of that information out through some contacts and put that out to people. But yeah, if there's a reason that you have to know that, you can ask it. For example, if you're hiring a truck driver that needs a CDL license, you're absolutely going to ask if they have any DUIs or drug offenses on their record, because you can't hire them if they do. That's a DOT reg. So does that answer the question? I might have clouded it further.
I think it answered the question. Jacqueline says thanks.
Okay. If she needs more information, give her she can have my email, and I will certainly research it at a deeper level for her to make sure she's got her answer.
Sounds good.
Okay, anything else?
Are there any other questions? If not, I just want to let you know that I will be sending out a follow-up email. And this will have any slides or handouts that Pam will have for you. I'll also ask that you fill out the survey that I will send you. It's very important that we receive those back for our program and to keep these great trainings coming to you. Samantha asks, where does everyone prefer to post ads for jobs? We're trying to think outside of the box.
So here's what I've been successful with, even in this market. So I've been successful if it's again, depends on the level of the position. Professional positions, I typically post on LinkedIn. I post them on Indeed, and I do sponsor it on Indeed because that gets you more. I do put it on Facebook, and I put it on Twitter if appropriate. There's also a couple sites. ZipRecruiter is good. The Pennsylvania Career Link is a free service that you can put it on there. I know there's a mixed bag of nuts if you put it on social media. So what someone said to me is, well, I put a job on social media and some ex-employees wrote nasty comments. So if you're going to put something on social media, you do have to monitor that. And you may have to block people from commenting, but it's a great way to share information. The local chambers often have job posting boards. I also use Handshake, which is the university job posting site. It connects all of the colleges and universities, and you complete a profile, and then you can post on there as well if you're looking for that type of position. So that's how I've been doing it. And any chance you can get out in front of people, whether it be at a job fair or a university employment day, anytime that you have an opportunity to get out and talk about what you're looking for, it's beneficial. We share resources in Venango County. There's a local HR group, and sometimes I get a resume and I'll throw it out to the group and say, hey, is anybody looking? I interviewed this person, solid candidate, let me know, So again, just that networking is helpful.
Beverly Rapp says, hi, Pam. And don't forget posting the PA career link. Did you say that?
Yes, I did say that.
It covers your vet
Yeah.
preferences, ADA and EOA requirements.
Yes. Yes.
I thought you did, but.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So.
Anything else?
I don't see anything.
Thank
Samantha
you.
says thank you.
Thank you all so much for your
Jacqueline
time.
says awesome presentation.
Thank you.
So
it was nice to be with you all.
We look forward to the reviews.
Okay. Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to sign off.
Bye-bye.